This question has just become far too common in all of my comment sections and live streams, so I'm finally going to answer it for you. Can the iPad mini be an iPhone replacement for a lot of people? The short answer is yes, but with just a billion strings attached. Kind of like the house from Up. It fixes a ton of problems with the iPhone, but also creates some new ones. Let's begin. So first of all, you should just be aware of the cost. Like, yes, technically the iPad mini does support cellular and even 5G, if you care about that, but only the useful kind of 5G, not ultra-wideband, but that's okay because I have literally never once been close to an ultra-wideband tower, and I know hardly anyone that's ever taken advantage of those speeds on a smartphone anyway, but in that case, you're still gonna have to pay for some kind of data plan for your iPad. Now, lots of major carriers have data options for tablets, but they're typically treated fairly differently from having dedicated phone numbers, and that prevents you from being able to receive SMS text messaging. So if you're in a very Apple-centered ecosystem and you can just iMessage everybody, that should work pretty well, but as soon as someone starts asking what's your phone number, or you want to receive SMS texts from third-party applications for two-factor authentication and that type of thing, that's when it starts to get a tad more complicated, and that shouldn't be too challenging an obstacle to overcome. It typically just involves you having to have an old iPhone with a fairly cheap data plan that you leave your SIM in and you keep that at home. And yes, you can have SMS text message forwarding to the iPad, but that means you still have to pay for your phone's data plan and an iPad data plan. Sorry, I don't know why I said data and data in the same sentence. You know, people say it one way or the other, but you notice no one says data, because that's just weird, but it's just rearranging the pronunciation a little bit. Anyway, it's not the end of the world. It's just probably going to cost you a bit more a month, especially if you want like unlimited data on this thing. That's when it starts costing you well over $10 a month to have an iPad cellular line. And it gets even more complicated if you have an Apple Watch. So not everyone does. So if you're the type of person who doesn't need a smartwatch, then I guess you're good. But if you do want an Apple Watch, there's currently no way to pair that watch to your iPad, which simply means you're going to have to pair that watch to your iPhone at home that you leave within a drawer, and have to make sure you buy a cellular Apple Watch of some kind. Then on top of that, have to pay for an Apple Watch cellular plan, which usually mimics and recreates the phone number and notifications of your iPhone at home. So that's probably going to cost you an extra $5 to $10 a month on top of the extra data you're already paying for the iPad. And on top of that, even if you spent all of that money, the Apple Watch is still technically not being paired to your iPad. They share an ecosystem together, but unlocking the iPad is not going to unlock your iPhone, and you're not going to get the activity app on your iPad. You're not even going to get the Apple Watch app on your iPad in that case. So if you want to go through some kind of software update with your watch, or you want to change some of the settings on your watch, you're still going to have to go home, take that iPhone out of the drawer, and access all of the Apple Watch settings, which you're not going to be able to access on here. So yes, technically you will be able to, receive notifications on your watch when you're out and about, but because it'll pretty much always be on cellular and never paired to your iPad, that's going to make the battery life on the watch much worse, and you're going to have to be paying a lot more per month for this to become your phone. And on top of that, you'll probably still need to have a phone that sits at home doing nothing a lot of the time. But let's talk advantages, right? There's all kinds of downsides I can list, including no Taptic engine on here, so if you like having a silent, vibration mode in your pocket for your phone, this isn't going to be capable of doing that. But if we talk about perks, if you're willing to put up with all of these challenges and you're willing to pay more per month, the iPad mini is technically pocketable. Probably not for girls' pants, but for a lot of cargo shorts out there, including my own, I'm able to somewhat comfortably just stuff the iPad mini in my pocket. And sure, it's a little awkward, it's a little clunky, but think about it. You've got a fairly wide aspect ratio 8.3-inch display in your pocket, and the speakers on this thing get pretty dang insanely loud. You're also getting an iOS device, you're in the Apple ecosystem, but now you have USB-C. You don't have to put up with the crappy lightning cables everywhere. You can charge off of Android chargers, and you can use the existing plethora of USB-C accessories out there if you plan to use your iPad for more pro-class workflows. A great example, of course, would be editing videos, because you can do LumaFusion on an iPhone, but obviously on an iPad it's just so much better. So that's obviously what I decided to do for today's video. This this is all being edited off the iPad mini, which has an amazing A15 chip. Even though it's slightly underclocked, you're getting a 5-core GPU, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and I have not noticed any lag or slowdown with the iPad mini. And something it can do that your iPhone can't is split screen multitasking. Thanks to iPadOS actually allowing for such a thing, you can have YouTube playing, picture-in-picture, Twitter and Discord going simultaneously, your news applications, whatever you want it to be. You can do a lot more with this operating system at the same time than you can do with an iPhone having to swipe between different applications. Also, if you're the type of person that really cares about having a stylus and you like taking quick notes and using the Apple Pencil, this will allow you to do that, whereas the iPhone still, to this day, no stylus support, because who wants a stylus, right? Someone said that at some point. I think it was Gandhi. Yeah, pretty sure. Gandhi, that's who it was. Also, if you're still having to wear a mask in your jurisdiction pretty regularly, the iPad mini does not use Face ID, and you can go back to using Touch ID, which I've actually really enjoyed on the iPad mini 6 because you don't have to tap the screen and then swipe up like you do with Face ID. You can actually just click the power button once, and because your finger is already resting there, it jumps to the home screen. So that actually makes the unlocking experience pretty dang quick, and it feels a tad more clunky when you're entering, iCloud keychain passwords and you just tap something on the display and it's like, put your finger here, put your finger here. But when it comes to just pulling the iPad mini out and resting my finger on Touch ID, it works pretty fast and it works very reliably. So I'm happy with the way that works, and I'm grateful that there's an option out there for people who don't want to use Face ID. And another great perk that might be looked at as somewhat of a downside is the front-facing camera on the iPad mini supports center stage. So if you like FaceTiming people pretty regularly, this will track you around, and it's a whole lot of fun, especially while you're live streaming, to have like a dedicated cameraman follow you around the room as you walk, and the iPhones currently do not support that. And even if you wanted to use this as some kind of video production tool, the ultra-wide camera on the front lets you zoom out all the way, and it actually looks pretty dang cool. Like, you can get quite amount of detail out of that 12 megapixel camera. It's capped at 1080 at 60, but it still looks pretty good to me if you're wanting to do some kind of light vlogging or set up your camera and talk for a while. Like, this iPad is so light that I can just hold it for extended periods of time and be able to have a very nice viewfinder for when I'm recording front-facing stuff. But that, of course, brings me to the rear-facing camera, which, of course, pretty much compared to any recent generation iPhone, is not terribly good, especially in this price range. Like, if you're buying a cellular iPad mini, you're probably spending, $600 or more. In that type of price point, you're going to get a much better rear-facing camera on an iPhone 12. Even an iPhone 11 is better than this because it has ultra-wide and night mode, and unfortunately, because of the lack of focus pixels or some garbage like that, there's no night mode on the iPad mini, despite it having an A15 chip and a 12 megapixel camera on the back. It's a decent camera, but the only people who should probably consider switching to an iPad mini as their phone are people that don't really plan on using the rear-facing camera too often, because it's fine, it gets the basics done, but I think it's essentially meant to be a glorified, document scanner and augmented reality stuff. Like, it's nice having a viewfinder this large, don't get me wrong, but the camera quality is definitely nowhere near as good as iPhones of the past 2 or 3 years. So that's why I say, if you're using the front-facing camera a lot, iPad mini good, but if you're using the rear-facing camera a lot, yeah, this is going to be quite a bit of a compromise. You also lose out on water resistance, unfortunately. You lose out on wireless charging. There's little downsides like that you have to put up with. Just a quick 4K at 60 test from the rear-facing camera on the iPad mini so you can hear how it sounds and how the microphone is, how it looks. And another detail I thought I would just add in the middle of this review is no NFC, no Apple Pay support. So if you're not the type of person to use an Apple Watch, if you're trying to make the iPad mini your phone, you might want to look into one, because you're not going to be able to do contactless payments through the iPad mini system, which is also a bit of a deal breaker for me and a lot of others. I'm personally a huge fan of MagSafe charging, and this obviously isn't going to support that, so just going to have to make sure you keep a USB-C cable around, but I think most of us do these days. You're also having to put up with 64 gigs by default with the iPad mini, which other iPhones, of course, have all now moved on to 128 gigs by default. There's no 120 hertz here, which is probably, unfortunately, my biggest issue with the iPad mini, because I've just fallen in love with 120 hertz all over again with my 13 Pro Max. Now to go to a big screen that's 60 hertz, it's pretty noticeable, but some people may not care or notice that type of thing. So if anyone out there was considering turning the iPad mini into their phone, iPhone. I thought I would just document that process for you here and let you know how complicated that is, what are the benefits and what are the disadvantages. Is it worth it to you guys? Do you think in the long run that would end up being a successful transition? And how many of you out there are considering doing this? Of course, feel free to let me know. I'm super duper curious. I did not buy the cellular iPad mini, so because of all the extra expense and having to sign up with contracts and monthly plans with my watch and my iPad, I decided not to do it. But I do know what it would take and I do know the advantages. But hey, I'm still gonna just keep my iPad mini rocking in my pocket anyway because it's fun. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.